The show focused on delivering beneficial information on everything to do with products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Phil Moriarty, the owner of the BC Canine Training Center at the foot of number 3 Road below Steveston Highway, right by the water in Richmond. It's a 5-acre facility that Phil has been running for 13 years, a former police officer, and in fact some of the work they do at the BC Canine Training Center is continuing to train working dogs up to the standards established by the Justice Institute of British Columbia, which is required for certification for a working dog in a security assignment. Right, Phil?
That's right, yeah.
So some of these, we were just talking about this during the break, because some of the work that you do is security work around auctions. And I'm talking about very fancy auctions involving millions of dollars worth of jewelry or gold or paintings or whatever at exclusive downtown hotel settings. And providing security for that sort of, well, tempting environment for the bad guys is going to be a handful of a job, Phil.
Less so with the canine.
I was just going to say, this is where the dogs come in, right?
Yeah, you can run faster than I can.
Mm-hmm. So they're always on patrol there when you have uniformed personnel accompanied by working dogs.
That's right, yeah. And but that's only a portion of it. You know, lots of times we're out on construction sites
mm-hmm.
or parkades, parking lots.
Right.
Condominiums, residential towers, that sort of thing. You know, there are a lot of uses for canines now.
Right. And
people find that you know, rather than hiring 7 or 8 security guards to do something, you can have one dog and one canine handler and cover all the territory and be. I was going to say just as effective, but probably even more effective.
Well, certainly from a cost-effective point of view, it really does represent an opportunity to have enhanced security that you didn't think you could afford.
Right. Yeah, especially, I mean, a lot of the places that we have patrols at are you know, 50-acre sites, and how many people would you have to have in a 50-acre site to protect all the ingresses and egresses and penetration points, that sort of thing, where a dog can smell much better than we can,
right?
And if you hold him downwind, anything that's in there, he's going to smell.
Interesting stuff.
So he can lead you right to it.
You were talking about, and we were talking about generally in terms of kennels and boarding, because it's the time of year. We're here in June, and all the summer months are lying before us here, and it's the time of year when we bug out, and frequently we'll take our animals with us on holidays, and other times it's just not right. It's just we're not going to the place that's pet friendly, and it would not be appropriate. So we look for option 2, which is board the animal out for a week or two. How many people, Phil, take advantage of the need to board the dog for a while and combine that with training?
That seems to be fairly popular now. You know, before people didn't really know, other than the boarding, they knew they were going to go away for a month or 2 months or whatever it would be, and always talked about when they come back, is the dog going to recognize me? Is the dog going to this? Is the dog going to that? You know, will he still love me?
Of course.
Yeah, or miss me as much as I miss him, and so once that conversation develops, then usually, well, what do you do with the dog? You know, when you're around the dog, what do you do with him so that he bonds with you?
Right.
Or is he just a house pet that is sort of an accessory, and you know, he's nice to have, but you don't take him out for walks, you don't really do a lot of things with him, so he hasn't really bonded with you. He's not going to remember you nearly as well as if you do a lot of things with him.
True.
And you've got this bonding through training and discipline, and they want leadership. So if I'm going to go away for a month and come back, and my dog is now trained, and I'm going to get that lesson with him, then he's going to understand that I'm now the leader, and that's what he wants.
Right. Okay.
Because as a pack animal, that's what they're looking for, is leadership.
Okay.
And if you don't take it, he's got it.
So now at the BC Canine Training Center, you offer 1- and 2-week training courses. What's the distinction between the two? Is a 2-week preferred for a younger dog because they got a lot more to learn, or how does it break down?
We prefer to have the dogs at least 6 months old before coming in for training, so that they get their money's worth.
Okay.
So the age of the dog is a component in decision making for that aspect. But it's more at what stage the dog is in its development, in terms of socialization and whether it's developed any bad habits. An older dog could have a lot more bad habits than a younger dog has developed.
Right.
So if the dog is not really problematic in terms of people aggression or dog aggression, chances are a 1 week, and if it's a year or more, a 1 week program might be sufficient for
Right.
But typically, a dog that has some problems, the first week is getting rid of some of the problems,
Sure.
and then developing the rest of it.
Right.
But a 2 week is the normal, and that's pretty much where you're going to get the best bang for your buck.
Right. Phil, if we get a dog from the pound, and it's an older dog, a year or older, young but still a maturing animal, but we don't know anything about the pound other than whatever history they've been able to give us when we adopted him. But we're a little leery of what history this animal has. It appears to be okay, but would that be the kind of dog that would be a perfect candidate for a training program? Because then there's a commonality of commands, and at least now there's a fresh template for the dog, and let alone you, to work with.
Yeah, I mean, a year old is still a young dog.
Yes.
If we really don't care from a training standpoint what the history of the dog has been.
Okay.
It's what we're dealing with now. So what we see now is and the dog lives in the day, doesn't live in the history.
Although the new owners, particularly with
has no history.
A rescue animal, there's no history at all. So the owner's just nervous.
Yeah. So having no history with the dog is a good thing.
Okay.
Because now the dog doesn't have to see you again in a different light. It hasn't seen you in any light yet.
Okay,
right?
Fair enough.
So you can be the leader when, if you get the dog, put it into training right away, that's the optimum time. Because it knows nothing about you. All it knows is its first exposure to you, other than you take it home and feed it and love it and all that sort of thing.
And you seem okay.
Right, and you haven't really developed any bad habits with it,
right.
and it hasn't developed any bad habit training of you. That's the time to seize the moment and get the dog trained, so that when you pick the dog up, you get the training session with the dog. It knows nothing else but you.
Right. So, and that was my next question, because whether it's the 1 week or the 2 week training course, the owner is also involved in a bit of training him or herself at the end of that course. There's an overlap in which the dog and the owner spend some time with the training staff to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no point in us training the dog and then the owner just picks it up and doesn't know what we've done.
Right.
And doesn't know, and may know what we've done, but hasn't physically. It's a hands-on thing. You have to hold that leash and know that you're holding it right, know that you're not holding it too tight, knowing that you're not holding it in the wrong position,
right.
Knowing that you're not giving it missed signals, missed cues. Then you correct the dog for doing what it thought you were telling it to do, confusing the dog, and the leash, when people before training take it for a walk, becomes the means of connection and miscommunication, because the dog doesn't know what you're doing with that leash.
Right.
It's pulling. It thinks it has to pull harder in order to get where it wants to go. You're pulling harder to stop it from going where you think it's wanting to go.
And it's a classic tug of war, and nobody's going anywhere.
Well, it's two TVs facing each other on different channels at full blast. There's lots of communication, but nobody communicating.
That's right. Yeah.
So the leash, once you're through training, is the least important thing unless it needs a correction.
Ah, okay.
Because when you've told it to do something, it'll be doing it, and you don't need the leash to make it do it.
I'm going to back you up to one of the things you mentioned when we were talking in our opening segment. I was talking about.
I've been backed up before.
Oh, I know you have. Well, and so this won't be the last time either. But you were talking about your days in the Delta Police Force as a canine officer and your four-footed companion, and you said, it's the best partner I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Never give me a second of back talk, et cetera, which of course is true. But it was the important part about that is this was a rescue dog. This was a pound pooch that you found and ended up on the police force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it came from it came from the pound.
Right. So
I don't even know whether they still call them pounds anymore, but that's what they did back then.
Shelter. That's right.
Okay.
Shelter. Yeah. Anyway, you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Are people, because you experience and meet every type of dog owner and pet imaginable, do people, when they get a pound puppy or pooch, are they right to be as concerned as some of them get about that missing history in terms of the animal, the big unknown? Well, we're taking a flyer here. Looks pretty nice, seems pretty well behaved, kind of the right size and weight for what we're after, but geez, we don't know anything about him.
For a dog that seems well behaved, it probably is.
Mm-hmm.
If it seems not well behaved, it just proved to you that it's not well behaved.
Right.
But the dog doesn't know the difference. All the dog knows is what it knows. You know, we're not intellectualizing with the dog. The dog is just doing what dogs do.
Right.
And if it's had a bad experience and people, maybe it's head shy. You know, you go to pet it.
And they shrink. Yeah, pull back.
Yeah. So right off the bat, that's telling me something about the dog.
Yeah, and that would now usually if we reach out to pet an animal and he pulls away, you in your head you go, somebody's beaten that dog, and it's the hand coming close to the head that they're shying away from,
or hasn't been exposed to lots of humans.
Oh, okay.
So
we always go to the worst case scenario, don't we?
Yeah. You know, so and there's a way of reaching. If you reach under the dog's chin, you're going to get a different response than if you reach over his head.
Right.
Because if it's a head-shy dog that has been beaten, it's going to shy away from you.
Sure.
And it could growl if it's got no place to go, if it's backed into a corner.
Right.
So, you know, pick your surroundings and then introduce yourself to the dog where the dog has some freedom of movement.
I always learned, and I learned this as a wee little kid, and I've done it my whole life. When I extend my hand to pet a dog, I let the dog smell my hand first.
Sure.
And then I can do whatever, but I give it a chance to at least go, is this guy all right or what? To have a second before you're all over its head. That's fair, isn't it?
It's fair, but it's step 2 rather than step 1.
Okay, what's step 1?
Ignore it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Then it'll come to you in its own time. And it'll smell you. It's going to get the same scent, but it's going to do it on its terms and not feel threatened.
Right.
If you bend down, put your hand towards the dog, already you don't know anything about the dog.
Right.
So already if the dog is shy,
and you're sticking your hand in its face,
sure, it's going to respond
what's up
differently.
with you?
But if you show no interest in the dog and be somewhat aloof, the dog is going to sniff you.
Right. Right.
And that's when it's going to get, now you can not even look at it and just sort of squat down and let it, now it's within reach of your hand. It can start licking your hand or do whatever. Now you can pet it.
Right.
So the dog's invited you instead of you imposing.
Well, I suppose some of these situations come up when you're walking along and you see a person with their dog and you start a conversation with the person, and then and what's Rover's name here, and then you meet the dog, and or you get introduced.
Probably
to the dog.
already the dog's sniffing you.
Oh yeah, I guess But I just learned it as a little guy. I remember my parents just saying, give the dog a chance.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, and I was little, so a little kid comes running up to a dog and just embraces them, and then kids do that. Oh, wow, big hug. And the dogs, I mean, if they're kid-friendly, they're great. But if they're not, that can be spooky.
Yeah. And, you know, we think that dogs love being hugged. Well, they don't really like being hugged. And
here's a keeper, folks. Remember this one. Flag this one.
If you've ever really hugged a dog, you know, other than a little lap dog, that's you know, if you take a shepherd and you start hugging it, what does it do? It tries to pull away from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they don't. They feel trapped. What it would rather have is a good tug rather than a good hug.
Oh, really?
Sure, they want to play, they want to interact, and that's the way they do it.
So one of those toys where you hold on to one end and the dog gets a good grip on the other, and it's just play tug of war.
Sure, a little tug
that's a dog hug. That's more fun for the dog than a person hug.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yep.
A tug rather than a hug. Keep that in mind.
Because you've probably seen it, where you go up to a dog. Oh, good, you know, and if
the dog just looks awkward.
If it's leaning up against you, that's an invitation from it that you can do it.
Right.
But if it's trying to get away from you, lots of times they just don't like the hug.
Okay, but that's
they like the tactileness.
You're right, sure.
But they don't like the hug that keeps them tied up to you.
Right. But it is interesting because some dogs will do that, and it's funny. They'll come up and they'll just literally park themselves. Sometimes they'll put a paw on one of your feet and they'll lean right up against you, like, "Oh man, I'm tired. Thank you for being here."
Yeah,
and
it's
just "Hey, how are you?"
Yeah, some breeds are better at that. You know, Dobermans are pretty good at wanting to lean on you. They're sensitive that way. But a lot of dogs that will do that right away. Sometimes it's just a little bit of dominance too.
Oh,
and usually
just
they
kind
won't
of pushing themselves on you, sort of thing. I'd never thought of it in that sense, but okay.
Or you know, some dogs will do it to their owners out of insecurity.
Ah, okay.
You know, so the dog's insecure. It's trying to bury itself against you. Because it's unsure of what's going on around it.
So was the cure for that a big old hug? And that'll get them confused for a moment, but then they'll try and pull away, and that'll straighten that out.
Yeah, or you can pull away and walk it towards whatever it was afraid of.
Aha. Now we're talking training.
Now you can fix something.
Right.
If you allow it to insinuate itself into your body by being fearful, then it's not going to get over it.
Now we're talking training specifics, and now we're getting to the really good stuff. We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to zero right in on some training techniques, whether they're advanced stuff like the pros at the BC Canine Training Center use, or little tips that you and I can use on a daily basis. Phil Moriarty is the owner of the BC Canine Training Center, located at the foot of No. 3 Road in Richmond, just below Steveston Highway, right there on the Fraser River, and it's a slough. It's there at the bottom of 3 Road, isn't it?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's wet if you go too far.
Well, that's true. I threw a few rocks in it when I was down at your place there last time. And by the way, their website is bccanine.com. Check it out. We'll take a quick break and come back with lots more after this.
Delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call. And there's more still ahead on AM 650.